July 1940, Portsmouth Naval Base, England. The war in Europe was barely a year old, and Britain stood alone. The Royal Navy's command of the seas was paramount, so the capture of a German Z-class destroyer, designated Z-34, was a significant event. Though damaged in a North Sea skirmish, its machinery spaces were surprisingly intact, offering a unique window into enemy naval engineering. For Commander Alistair Finch, a distinguished marine engineer in the Royal Navy, this was a critical mission. His goal: dissect the enemy's much-vaunted naval technology and expose any vulnerabilities. Finch was an expert in steam turbines and boilers, possessing an intuitive understanding of complex power systems. He knew that German boasts of superior engineering often masked a more nuanced reality. "She's a fine-looking ship on the surface, Commander," remarked Lieutenant Davies, his junior engineer, as they surveyed the Z-34's sleek lines. "The Germans claim high speeds and advanced propulsion." Finch ran a gloved hand along the cold steel of the engine room bulkhead. "Appearance and performance, Davies, are often two different things. We've heard whispers of their surface fleet's particularities." The Kriegsmarine, despite its numerical inferiority, prided itself on technological sophistication. Its Z-class destroyers were designed for high speed and long endurance, crucial for commerce rating. At the core of this ambition were their advanced high-pressure steam turbine systems, theoretically capable of speeds exceeding 38 knots. Finch's team, comprising Royal Navy engineers and civilian experts, began their painstaking work. They pumped out water, then meticulously documented and dismantled the massive turbine units. They took core samples from boiler pipes, scraped residue from condenser tubes, and prepared the intricate turbine blades for detailed analysis in their makeshift shore laboratory. The initial findings were impressive. The fundamental design of the high-pressure turbines was advanced, demonstrating innovative German engineering principles. The metallurgy of the turbine blades generally met high standards for the period. However, as they began reassembling and testing components and cross-referencing observations with intelligence from earlier captured vessels and decrypted communications, a subtle, disturbing pattern emerged. The problems lay not in the theoretical design, but in operational realities and material execution. "Commander," Lieutenant Davies reported, indicating a bearing housing, "we're seeing excessive wear here, far more than expected. And look at this, pitting on the main shaft." Finch suspected chronic overheating and lubrication issues, but a more insidious problem, he believed, stemmed from something fundamental: the quality of the steam itself. Captured German maintenance logs, painstakingly translated, contained repeated entries about boiler tube fatigue, condenser leaks, and unscheduled turbine inspections. These whispers were now solidified into hard data. "The Germans boasted of their high-pressure steam," Finch murmured, tapping a boiler sample. "But high pressure demands high purity. If their feedwater isn't perfectly treated, if their boilers are accumulating scale and impurities, then their advanced turbines are being slowly poisoned." This was the terrifying implication. German pride in cutting-edge turbine technology was, Finch suspected, masking a fatal flaw. Their very propulsion system, the source of their boasted speed and range, harbored a systemic vulnerability that was crippling their surface fleet and turning their sleek destroyers into unreliable, high-maintenance headaches. The pristine prisoner of Portsmouth was about to reveal a tale of engineering ambition undermined by operational reality. August 1940, Portsmouth Naval Base, England. The initial findings from the captured Z-34 destroyer, particularly the evidence of premature wear on turbine bearings and pitting on shafts, deeply concerned Commander Alistair Finch. His team's subsequent metallurgical analysis of boiler tube samples and condenser residue confirmed his gravest suspicions. The problem wasn't merely wear and tear, it was systemic water quality. "Commander, the residue from the boiler tubes indicates high levels of dissolved solids," Dr. Eleanor Vance, a brilliant civilian chemist attached to Finch's team, reported. Her lab coat was often streaked with various reagents, her enthusiasm for chemical analysis infectious. "And the pitting on the turbine blading and shafts. It's consistent with stress corrosion cracking, exacerbated by impurities in the steam." The Z-34, like all German Z-class destroyers, relied on a sophisticated high-pressure steam plant. Such systems demand exceptionally pure feedwater, water entirely free of dissolved minerals, salts, and oxygen. Impurities, even in minute quantities, can lead to scale. Build-up, minerals deposit on boiler tubes, reducing heat transfer efficiency and leading to localized overheating. Corrosion. Dissolved oxygen and salts attack internal metal surfaces, causing pitting and stress corrosion cracking in boilers, steam lines, and even turbine blades. Erosion. Particulates carried by the steam can erode turbine blading, reducing efficiency and balance. "The Germans boasted of their advanced high-pressure boilers," Finch explained to Lieutenant Davies, holding up a corroded piece of boiler tube. but they underestimated the sheer difficulty of maintaining absolute water purity in operational conditions, especially with wartime resource constraints. This was the silent corrosion, an invisible enemy attacking the very heart of the German fleet. The ambitious design of their turbines and boilers, intended to deliver superior speed and range, was being silently undermined by a fundamental flaw in their water treatment and operational maintenance protocols. This was a fatal mistake of a different kind, not a design error, but a logistical and material failure to support that design. Finch's team delved into captured German naval handbooks and training manuals. They found that while the Germans had guidelines for water treatment, their ability to procure high-purity chemicals for treatment, or even to perform consistent, rigorous testing at sea, was severely hampered by wartime shortages and the realities of extended operations. "Their water softeners are inadequate, Commander," Dr. Vance concluded, "and their crew training, while focused on operation, seems to lack the necessary emphasis on meticulous chemical maintenance, or perhaps they simply don't have the materials to do it properly." The implications were stark. These high-pressure, high-performance turbines and boilers, designed for reliability, were actually incredibly fragile. They were experiencing accelerated wear, reduced efficiency, and periodic, unpredictable breakdowns. This meant German destroyers, for all their speed on paper, were often sailing with degraded propulsion, requiring frequent, lengthy overhauls. This intelligence began to explain many mysterious German surface fleet operational problems that Allied intelligence had previously struggled to understand. Reports of German destroyers being surprisingly slow during engagements, or having to abort missions due to machinery failure, suddenly made grim sense. It wasn't always a direct enemy hit. Often it was the silent corrosion, taking its toll. The Germans, blinded by their pride and cutting-edge design, failed to see how their industrial base and operational realities were betraying their own technology. Their destroyers were not just fighting the Royal Navy, they were fighting the very water that sustained them. The ambition of German engineering was, ironically, being undone by the simple chemistry of impure water, systematically corroding the integrity of their surface fleet, one turbine blade at a time. September 1940. Naval Intelligence Division, the Admiralty, London. Commander Alistair Finch presented his findings from the Z-34 destroyer to a gathering of senior naval officers. His report detailed the insidious effects of impure feedwater on German high-pressure steam turbines, identifying it as a primary cause for their observed unreliability. "Admiral," Finch stated, gesturing to charts illustrating turbine wear and boiler scale, "the problem is fundamental. Their advanced propulsion systems are built upon a flawed foundation, a failure to consistently maintain water purity. This leads to accelerated corrosion, stress fractures in boiler tubes, and premature wear on critical turbine components." Admiral Sir William James, the stern-faced director of naval intelligence, listened intently. This was a significant revelation. The Royal Navy had long understood the challenges of high-pressure steam, but the scale of the German operational failures now explained was striking. "So, their boast of speed and range is often undermined by their own pipes clogging up," James rumbled, a grim smile forming. "Precisely, sir. The Z-class destroyers, for all their power on paper, are inherently fragile in operation. They require extensive, frequent maintenance, and their reliability is compromised. Many breakdowns previously attributed to battle damage or random failures are, in fact, systemic." This was the flawed foundation that crippled the Kriegsmarine surface fleet. German ship designers, driven by Hitler's demand for faster, more powerful warships, pushed the boundaries of steam technology. However, the industrial infrastructure and logistical support required to sustain such high-tech systems under wartime conditions were insufficient. Shortages of specialized water treatment chemicals, high-grade condenser tubing, and skilled maintenance personnel all conspired against the ambitious designs. This failure was a fatal mistake that German high command stubbornly refused to acknowledge. They viewed breakdowns as isolated incidents or a result of crew error rather than a symptom of a deeper, systemic issue rooted in material science and logistical reality. This blind spot would prove disastrous for their surface fleet's operational effectiveness. The implications for Allied naval strategy were immediate. While the Royal Navy still respected the firepower of German destroyers, their inherent unreliability meant they posed less of a sustained threat. Allied planners could now factor in a higher probability of German machinery failures during protracted engagements or long-range operations. October 1940. North Sea Patrol, aboard HMS Intrepid Lieutenant Commander Robert Stirling, captain of the British I-class destroyer HMS Intrepid, studied the latest intelligence summary. It included Finch's key findings on German turbine vulnerabilities. "So, the Hun destroyers are glass cannons, then?" Stirling mused to his first lieutenant, Commander Evans. "Fast, powerful, but with a dodgy engine room. It means we might not always need to sink them, sir. Evans replied. "Just keep them running hard, force them to push their engines, and their own weaknesses might take over." The Intrepid was on patrol in the treacherous waters of the North Sea, notorious for sudden violent storms. Intelligence indicated a German destroyer group was attempting a mine-laying operation off the British coast. "Radar contact, bearing 030, multiple fast-moving targets," the radar operator called out. "Looks like 3 destroyers, sir." Sterling's heart quickened. This was it. "Full ahead, intercept course, prepare for action." The Intrepid surged forward, slicing through the heavy swells. Hours later, through the driving rain and spray, the silhouettes of 3 German Z-class destroyers emerged. A fierce gun battle ensued, shells whistling through the darkened sky. Aboard Z-22 Anton Schmidt, Kapitän Lieutenant Max Schulze barked orders, his ship unleashing a torrent of fire. His destroyers were fast, maneuvering brilliantly, but the relentless pace of the engagement, the sudden speed changes, and the pounding of the rough sea were putting immense strain on his engine rooms. "Engine room reports pressure drop, Herr Kapitän," the chief engineer yelled over the din. "Warning light on turbine bearing. Overheating. We need to reduce speed." Schulze cursed. "Reduce speed? Now? Are you mad? The British are on us. Keep pushing. Keep pushing." But the Z-22's advanced turbines, already suffering from accumulated stress and corrosion, could not sustain the abuse. The insufficient feedwater treatment and the cumulative internal damage took their toll. A high-pitched shriek emanated from deep within the ship, followed by a sudden, jarring shudder. "Main turbine seizing. We've lost power to the starboard shaft," the engineer screamed. "Engine room reports catastrophic bearing failure. We are slowing." The Z-22 Anton Schmidt lurched, its speed rapidly dropping from 35 knots to a mere crawl. It immediately became a sitting duck, limping helplessly as the Intrepid turned for another attack run. Its sister ships, unwilling to risk their own compromised engines, broke off the engagement and fled into the storm. On the bridge of the Intrepid, Sterling saw the German destroyer falter. "He's crippled," he yelled, a grim satisfaction in his voice. "He's lost power. Press the attack." The Z-22 Anton Schmidt was subsequently overwhelmed and sunk, not just by British gunfire, but by its own flawed foundation, giving way under the stresses of combat. The fatal mistake of German engineering, fueled by ambitious design and insufficient support, had claimed another victim, silently corroding their surface fleet from within. March 1941, German Naval High Command, Berlin. Admiral Erich Raeder, Commander-in-Chief of the Kriegsmarine, reviewed the operational reports for his destroyer fleet with a growing sense of frustration. While the Battle of the Atlantic raged and U-boats scored successes, his surface fleet, particularly the Z-class destroyers, was plagued by persistent reliability issues. "Another 5 destroyers in dockyard hands, Admiral," his chief of staff reported grimly. 2 Z-boats with boiler tube failures, one with a major turbine-bearing overhaul, another needing extensive condenser repairs, all unscheduled, all delaying deployments. Raeder slammed his fist on the map table. "This is unacceptable. We design and build the finest warships in the world, yet they spend more time in port than at sea. What is the cause of this constant attrition?" The internal reports from German engineers and shipyards echoed Commander Finch's findings. They detailed recurring problems: excessive scale in boilers, rapid corrosion of condenser tubes, frequent turbine blade erosion, and premature bearing failures. These were attributed to boiler water difficulties, material fatigue, and high operational tempo. However, the underlying systemic issue of inadequate water treatment and material compromise, exacerbated by wartime shortages, was often obscured or downplayed by senior command. This was the unseen attrition gnawing at the Kriegsmarine surface fleet. For every destroyer damaged by enemy action, several more were incapacitated by mechanical breakdowns, draining precious resources, skilled manpower, and invaluable operational time. This represented a fatal mistake that German High Command continued to ignore, convinced of the inherent superiority of their designs. They focused on external threats and tactical failures, rather than the insidious internal vulnerabilities. This blind spot meant that while Raeder ordered more rigorous maintenance schedules and intensified crew training, the core problem of impure feedwater and material stresses persisted, silently corroding the very foundations of his advanced warships. April 1941, North Atlantic, near Greenland. HMS Nelson, a Royal Navy battleship, was on escort duty protecting a vital convoy. Out of the driving snow and sleet, radar picked up a contact, a lone German destroyer attempting to intercept a straggler. "Enemy destroyer closing, sir," the radar operator called out. "Looks like a Z-class, fast-moving." Aboard Z-26, Kapitän Lieutenant Franz Punich was pushing his engines to their limit. His mission was daring, a solo dash to harry the convoy, hoping to draw out British escorts for a U-boat attack. but his engine room had been reporting issues for hours. "Main boiler pressure dropping, Herr Kapitän," the chief engineer yelled over the roar of the engines. "We have serious steam leaks. We are losing efficiency." Punich cursed under his breath. He knew the drill. The persistent issues with the feedwater and the strain on his turbines were constant. He had orders, however, and he had to push. The Z-26 for a time managed to keep pace, launching torpedoes and engaging the convoy's escort destroyers, but the relentless chase and the violent maneuvers exacerbated its internal problems. The already stressed boiler tubes, weakened by previous corrosion and scale, began to leak more severely. The turbine bearings, starved of proper lubrication due to overheating, began to grind. "Starboard turbine seizing, Herr Kapitän," the engineer screamed. "Catastrophic failure imminent. We must reduce speed immediately or risk total shutdown." Punich was faced with a terrible choice: continue the attack and risk his ship becoming completely dead in the water, or reduce speed and become an easy target. He chose the latter, reluctantly ordering a drastic reduction in speed. The Z-26 immediately slowed, its once formidable speed evaporating. It fell behind the convoy, its radar signature fading from a fast-moving threat to a limping target. The Nelson, noticing the sudden drop in speed, turned its massive guns towards the crippled destroyer. The Z-26 was eventually overwhelmed and sunk by HMS Nelson and its escorting destroyers. While the British guns delivered the killing blow, the initial incapacitation of the Z-26 was caused not by enemy fire, but by its own unseen attrition, its advanced turbines and boilers failing under the stress of combat and years of systematic neglect in water quality. Rader would receive reports of Z-26's loss, attributing it to overwhelming British firepower. He would never fully grasp that a significant portion of his surface fleet was being silently destroyed from within, corroded by impure water and undermined by the fatal mistake of ambitious engineering unsupported by robust industrial and logistical reality. The unseen attrition continued, relentlessly grinding away at Germany's naval power. May 1942, Kiel Naval Base, occupied Germany. The dry docks of Kiel, once bustling with the construction of the formidable German fleet, now echoed with the frustrated shouts of engineers. Admiral Erich Raeder, despite mounting evidence, continued to demand peak performance from his Z-class destroyers. Yet the ships continued to fail, spending disproportionate amounts of time undergoing unscheduled repairs. Engineers like Korvettenkapitän Ulrich Brandt, a composite character representing a disillusioned German naval engineer, tasked with keeping the destroyers operational, faced an impossible dilemma. Their sophisticated high-pressure turbines and boilers designed for optimal performance were inherently fragile in the face of wartime realities. "Another set of turbine blades needs replacement, Ulrich," Brandt's chief engineer lamented, examining a corroded blade. "Stress fractures along the root, and the boiler tubes in Z-25 are heavily scaled again. We simply do not have the pure water chemicals nor the time to maintain these systems as designed." This was the weight of ambition that crushed the Kriegsmarine surface fleet. German designers had pushed the boundaries of steam technology, achieving incredible power-to-weight ratios. However, this ambition came at a hidden cost: an extreme sensitivity to water impurities, lubrication standards, and continuous meticulous maintenance, all luxuries that wartime Germany could not consistently afford. The fatal mistake was not in the engineering brilliance itself, but in the catastrophic mismatch between that brilliance and the industrial capacity and resource availability to sustain it under total war. Resource shortages, critical water treatment chemicals, high-grade condenser tubing, and specialized bearing alloys became scarce due to Allied blockade and bombing. Overstretched logistics. Dockyards were overwhelmed, and skilled technicians were siphoned off for other war efforts or military service. Operational tempo. Destroyers were constantly deployed, leaving little time for the rigorous preventative maintenance their delicate systems demanded. German Naval Command, driven by Hitler's demands for a formidable surface fleet, suppressed internal reports highlighting these systemic issues. The narrative of German technological superiority had to be maintained. Breakdowns were attributed to operational stress rather than fundamental flaws in support systems. July 1942. Alexandria, Egypt. British naval intelligence, building on Commander Finch's earlier findings, had a clear picture of the German destroyer fleet's vulnerabilities. They knew that sustained engagements, particularly in rough seas or against fast-moving targets, would inevitably push German engines past their breaking point. "Their Achilles' heel isn't their armor, gentlemen," Captain Andrew Cunningham, a composite character representing a senior RN operations officer, briefed his destroyer captains. "It's their engine room. Their turbines are glass, their boilers are tea kettles. Force them to sprint, force them to turn, and they'll break themselves." This intelligence profoundly influenced Allied naval tactics. Instead of always seeking a decisive knockout blow, Allied destroyers were often instructed to engage German surface units in protracted chases or maneuvering duels. The objective was to force the Germans to push their compromised engines beyond their breaking point, relying on their own weight of ambition to cripple them. September 1942, Battle of the Barents Sea, fictionalized element. A German destroyer group, including Z-31, was attempting a raid on an Arctic convoy. The weather was brutal, with towering waves and freezing temperatures. Aboard Z-31, Fregatten Kapitan Walter Henke was in command, pushing his destroyers to maintain speed through the raging storm. His mission was critical, but his engine room was in constant distress. "Port turbine bearing overheating, Herr Kapitan," the chief engineer roared over the storm. "We have a severe vibration. Speed reduction required immediately." Henke hesitated. Reducing speed meant falling behind, jeopardizing the mission, but ignoring the warning meant losing the engine. He chose to push. Minutes later, a catastrophic metallic shriek tore through the ship. The port turbine, its bearings worn and starved of lubrication, seized violently. The ship lurched, losing significant speed and stability. It became a lumbering target. The British cruiser HMS Sheffield, a veteran of Arctic convoys, quickly capitalized on the Z-31's sudden slowdown. It closed in, its guns finding their mark on the crippled destroyer. The Z-31, once a symbol of German naval might, was reduced to a burning hulk. Its destruction was swift, but its fate had been sealed long before the Sheffield's shells struck home. It was the weight of ambition, the fatal mistake of German engineering that had pushed its delicate turbines past their breaking point, ensuring its demise. The silent, internal struggle had finally manifested in a spectacular fiery end, highlighting the profound vulnerability of Germany's surface fleet. November 1942. Lecture Hall, Royal Naval College, Greenwich, England. Commander Alistair Finch, now a respected authority on enemy naval technology, addressed a class of aspiring Royal Navy engineers and officers. Behind him, detailed schematics of a German Z-class destroyer's engine room, complete with annotated diagrams of stress fractures and corrosion points, were projected. "Gentlemen," Finch began, his voice cutting through the quiet hum of the projector, "the Kriegsmarine built ships of formidable appearance. Their Z-class destroyers, in particular, boasted cutting-edge high-pressure steam turbines, designed for speed and endurance. However, our intelligence, gathered from captured vessels and extensive analysis, revealed a profound Achilles heel." He pointed to a section of the turbine diagram. "Here, the delicate interplay between high-pressure steam, advanced turbine design, and the vital support systems. The Germans, in their ambition, pushed the technology to its limits, but failed to provide the necessary operational robustness." Finch then systematically outlined the fatal flaws. Extreme sensitivity to water. Purity. High-pressure steam plants demand exceptionally pure feedwater. German wartime shortages of specialized chemicals and equipment made this consistently impossible. Corrosion and scale. Impure water led to chronic boiler tube corrosion, scale buildup, reducing efficiency, and stress cracking in critical components. Bearing and lubrication issues. Overheating bearings and lubrication problems, exacerbated by degraded steam quality, caused premature failures and vibrations. Material shortages. While the initial turbine blades were good, later production suffered from substitutions for vital alloys. Operational strain. The constant demand for high speed and long patrols, coupled with inadequate dockyard support, pushed already compromised systems beyond their breaking point. "These weren't isolated incidents," Finch emphasized, holding up a corroded piece of boiler pipe. "This was a systemic vulnerability, the Achilles heel of the Kriegsmarine. Their destroyers, for all their impressive specifications, were inherently fragile under wartime conditions." He cited compelling statistics gleaned from captured German maintenance records. An average German Z-class destroyer spent over 30% of its operational time in dockyards for unscheduled machinery repairs. Many missions were aborted or significantly hampered due to turbine or boiler failures. A significant number of Z-boat losses, initially attributed solely to enemy action, were in fact precipitated by machinery breakdowns that rendered them vulnerable. Finch then showed slides of German destroyers, listing heavily or dead in the water, captured by Allied reconnaissance. Many showed no immediate battle damage to their hulls, yet their fate was sealed by internal collapse. These were the silent casualties, the unseen attrition that crippled the Kriegsmarine. The German High Command, particularly Admiral Raeder, clung to the belief in their technological superiority, Finch explained. They dismissed these failures as isolated incidents or crew errors, unwilling to confront the systemic issues stemming from their ambitious designs, meeting the harsh realities of a total war economy. This refusal to acknowledge the fundamental flaw was a fatal mistake that cost Germany dearly. Their destroyers, instead of being formidable instruments of naval power, became logistical nightmares, constantly requiring resources and skilled personnel they could ill afford. "The lesson, gentlemen," Finch concluded, "is this. True naval power isn't just about cutting-edge design, it's about the entire ecosystem of support, maintenance, and material quality. The most advanced engine in the world is useless if it's fed dirty water, or if its bearings seize. The Kriegsmarine surface fleet ultimately buckled under the weight of its own ambition, undermined by a silent, corrosive Achilles heel. The future generation of Royal Navy officers left the lecture hall with a profound understanding. The constantly failing turbines of the German destroyers had not only saved Allied ships and lives, but it also provided an invaluable, if grim, lesson in the intricate balance between technological ambition and operational reality. This insight would shape British naval engineering for decades to come, ensuring their own warships would not suffer the same self-inflicted fate. Post-war, 1950s onwards. The roar of naval guns faded into history, and the Kriegsmarine's formidable surface fleet lay largely at the bottom of the sea or was parceled out to the victorious Allies. Yet the engineering lessons learned from their operational failures, particularly the insights gleaned by Commander Alistair Finch and his team, left an indelible mark on post-war naval design and engineering principles. The saga of the German destroyer Turbines became a canonical case study taught in naval academies and engineering schools worldwide. It served as a potent, enduring example of how cutting-edge design, when unsupported by robust material science, meticulous maintenance, and a resilient industrial base, could lead to catastrophic operational unreliability. The constantly failing turbines became a powerful symbol of the unforeseen costs of wartime compromise. Commander Finch, now a distinguished professor of marine engineering at Imperial College London, often presented the Z-class destroyer case. He emphasized that the fatal mistake was not a singular design flaw, but a complex interplay of ambitious technology, material shortages, and a strategic blind spot within the German high command. The Germans had brilliant minds, Finch would explain to his students, pointing to schematics of a turbine. But their ambition, fueled by Hitler's demands, outstripped their ability to sustain that ambition. They focused on headline speeds, not on the metallurgy of every bearing, or the chemical purity of every drop of feed water. His lectures highlighted the primacy of water chemistry. High-pressure steam plants absolutely demand ultra-pure water. German failures underscored the critical need for sophisticated water treatment systems and rigorous, consistent monitoring. The crucial role of materials, shortages of nickel, chromium, and molybdenum for turbine blades and boiler tubes, along with insufficient quality control for bearings and seals, created systemic weaknesses. The cost of compromised maintenance. The intricate systems required constant expert care, which wartime logistics and overstretched dockyards often could not provide. The legacy of the Kriegsmarine's turbine troubles profoundly influenced the design of subsequent generations of warships, particularly during the Cold War. Navies around the world, including the Royal Navy and the U.S. Navy, invested heavily in more robust, less sensitive propulsion systems, superior water treatment technologies, and comprehensive preventative maintenance programs. The aim was to ensure that their own vessels would not succumb to the same self-inflicted breakdowns that plagued the German fleet. For the surviving German naval engineers like Korvettenkapitän Ulrich Brandt, our composite character, the post-war years brought a bitter understanding. They had known the problems existed, had seen the frustration in the dockyards, but were powerless to challenge the prevailing dogma of German engineering superiority during the war. Only in retrospect, with Finch's comprehensive analysis, did the full, tragic picture emerge. "We built engines of incredible power," Brandt reflected in a post-war interview, "but we failed to build them engines of incredible reliability. We were always fighting the enemy, but also always fighting our own machinery. Our greatest strength became our hidden weakness." The story of the German destroyer Turbines is a powerful testament to the often invisible battle of logistics, resources, and engineering integrity that underpins any military conflict. It showcases how meticulous scientific investigation, even into the smallest details of enemy machinery, can uncover vulnerabilities that contribute significantly to the broader strategic outcome. The ambitious, sleek destroyers of the Kriegsmarine, once feared for their speed, ultimately floundered not just from Allied fire, but from the corrosive, fatal mistake of their own compromised, high-strung hearts. Their failure left a lasting imprint, teaching future generations that true naval power is built not just on ambition, but on uncompromising, fundamental reliability. This brings us to a final, thought-provoking question for our audience. Beyond naval ships, can you think of other historical or even modern examples where a single, seemingly minor, mechanical or material component became the Achilles heel for a complex, advanced piece of military technology? Share your thoughts and insights in the comments below. I read every single one.